things that we found in working with the American Indians and the Mexican Americans and the other youngsters was that ethnic group seemed not to be a determining factor, that they emerged as individuals. And the success of the program in reference to the progress that the youngsters have made is much more in relationship to the strength of the individual child rather than the ethnic group. I think further that we're gaining a lot of insights into the feelings and reactions of these youngsters. The reports that they were able to give to us in reference to how they feel about school and how they feel about some of the experiences that they have had differ rather remarkably from the school's attitudes toward the way in which these youngsters behave in the usual classroom situation. It's our hope then that as we work with the public schools in the two-county area, we will have some real information that will be useful to the average teacher in helping these youngsters.
You mentioned American Indian, a component. How many American Indians, what is the percentage of American Indians in the project?
We had 50 participants, and of the 50, 26 were American Indians. Now, here again, when you have a charming little, or rather rotund boy, as a matter of fact, with bright red hair, and another short, stubby baseball player with blonde hair, both of whom are Indians, we are using the term in a rather general fashion.
By the way, what's the size of the Rockefeller grant?
We have $100,000 for a 2-year program. Our program differs again from Overcome in that the youngsters just have one opportunity. Those youngsters who were involved here at Western last summer are being followed with a control group, but will not return to the campus. We're in the process now of soliciting nominations for 50 additional participants who will take part in the program this coming summer.
The holder of a Title III grant under the Higher Education Act of 1965, Dr. Larry Douglas, is carrying on a rather different sort of investigation of the disadvantaged. Tell us about it, Larry.
Well, the project is designed to find out what has been the effect in the Seattle public school system, especially in the central area, of the program, the compensatory educational programs designed for treating the disadvantaged pupils in the public schools themselves. For the last 2 years, we've had teachers here in an institute, teachers for the disadvantaged, with whom we work, and they've presumably learned certain techniques, and this is designed to find out what they have done, what has happened because of what they've done, if anything. More or less also to find out certain basic statistical information, how many pupils there are that can be so classed, how many teachers there are, what the programs involve, how much information has been fed out to the community, especially to parents, and so on, and to examine whether effects such as reduction of dropout rate and so on can be ascertained in the project.
VICOET means Visual Communication Education, and we're trying to prepare people for industry or for the public schools as teachers and the community colleges so they will have a much broader background than the traditional graphic arts programs. These new programs in VICOET will include such things as the design of communications, visual presentations, printed media, and the big information and storage retrieval systems.
You also have considerable support from industry as well as that $490,000 Ford Foundation grant, do you not?
Yes, we have approximately $317,000 as of January the 1st this year.
From all industrial sources?
From all industrial sources. Now, this includes a work-study program from the Boeing Company.
Yes. All told, then, you're now the boss of about a $750,000 operation.
That's right. Then including this, in addition to this, really, the schools will be putting in about $350,000 also.
Now, you say the schools.
The college and the pilot schools. This is in the form of equipment, supplies, materials, release time for teachers, travel, and so on.
How many schools are tied in as satellites to the program, right?
There are 4 high schools in Vancouver, BC, which makes it really an international project. There's 1 high school in Bellingham. There are 4 in Tucson, Arizona, 1 in Kailua, Hawaii. There's a junior college in Seattle, and the Milwaukee Institute of Technology.
This grew out of a philosophic position that I published in '62, and it's based on the following statement. The question one asks and the frame of reference which one asks it determines the kind of data that one looks for and the answer one gets. The answers can be divided into several different kinds of problems. I have called these specific problems, for example. An example of that would be, how many swings will this pendulum bob make in 10 seconds? The answer to this question is a singular one and can be answered by the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students with whom we are working. A second kind of question deals with a comparative. It compares 2 answers. For example, how many swings will the pendulum make in 10 seconds without the presence of a magnet and with the presence of a magnet? This, too, is easily answered by the children. There is a single event that they would have to do to answer the question. These are the easiest ones. The third kind of question is one that one would call experimental. This involves doing more than one thing to find the answer. For example, one could say, how does the number of oscillations of the pendulum bob vary with the distance the magnet is from the pendulum? Now, one would have to use several different distances to see that as the distance of the magnet decreases, the effect upon the pendulum bob will also decrease. This would then be called a qualitative experimental question. The quantitative experimental question would be a quantification or getting an equation for the data that one would collect.
We're in the business here of studying the structure and the properties of atomic nuclei. As you know, atomic nuclei consist of neutrons and protons. The problem is to decipher the motions that go on within the atomic nucleus based upon this knowledge of its structure. To do this, we need fairly high energy particles. We use in this laboratory neutrons to bombard atomic nuclei and investigate their structure. We produce these neutrons with this hardware that you will see in the lab. The neutrons are produced by the collision of hydrogen isotopes. We use heavy hydrogen isotopes known as deuterium and tritium. We bombard deuterium into tritium with an approximate energy of 200,000 volts, and this amazingly produces, in a fusion reaction, about 15 million volt neutrons. These neutrons have enough energy to enable the investigator to blast apart atomic nuclei and to investigate their structure. I'm sitting at the console which controls the device behind about 270 tons of concrete shielding designed to protect the investigators and surrounding people from the hazards of radiation. We have a number of instruments which we use for counting particles that emerge from neutron bombardments of light nuclei. These instruments consist of scalars and amplifiers and computers. Our main instrument is a very simple accelerator, which is just to produce the neutrons alone. The neutrons are then used to investigate the various structures of light nuclei. One problem which we are interested in is the problem of the very lightest nuclei. It turns out that there are no pure atomic nuclei consisting of only protons or only neutrons. We have, hopefully, some preliminary data which indicates that there is a pure atomic nucleus. We call it the trineutron.
Well, you're amending your previous statement that you may have found a new nucleus, right?
We may have found a new nucleus. The preliminary data, of course, will be submitted to periodicals and the criticism of the rest of the scientific world.
Clearly, no one of the researches extant at Western Washington State College can be regarded as typical, but in many ways, Dr. June Ross epitomizes the new breed. First of all, she is from Australia, a PhD from the University of Sydney, postgraduate training and research at Yale, subsequently at other universities, and finally has settled down here at Western with her husband, Dr. Charles Ross. Dr. Charles Ross is engaged in geological research, Dr. June Ross in paleobiology. This makes her one of the new breed as well, since we did not have such disciplines present, or such research present at Western until a couple of years ago. Then, too, Dr. June Ross epitomizes the new researchist at Western in that most of her salary and most of her time is devoted to pure research and from funds drawn from private agencies and from federal foundations. Finally, you will observe that Dr. June Ross is possessed pulchritudinously of 2 X chromosomes. Again, a peculiarity a few years ago at Western, but many of our outstanding researchers now are female. June, what's that spongy material that you're dealing with there?
Oh, this coral-like material. This is a colony, a calcareous colony of an ectoproct. Generally, they look very close to a coral, and therefore we generally think of them more as corals. This one is quite familiar to the many people in the Puget Sound area, and these finger-like dendritic growths occur below the low tide level, going down into the subtidal region. The calcareous material secreted by these various organisms, primarily marine organisms, take many different forms, and I have been concerned primarily with the different calcification structures that are present in the variety of forms covering over about 4,000 species.
Where did you get these samples of the 4,000 species from, June?
Well, these come from many places. These are some of them are fossil material from the United States, coming from New York State, across the central states, and as I have mentioned, these come from the Puget Sound, San Juan Islands. Some of this material here is off the South Australian continental shelf, and other material I have seen from the Himalayas and various places in Europe.
And in how many of these areas have you yourself done the field work?
The field work, all of it in the United States, and some of the material from Australia I have done the field work on, and the Himalayan material was reference material from the Dutch and the Austrian expeditions to the Himalayas about 2-3 years ago.
This is Dr. Carol Deers of the Psychology Department, and Dr. Deers is responsible for publications in the field of personality research. Could you tell us something about it, Dr. Deers?
Yes, one of our concerns was what it is that determines an individual's response to personality test items. We discovered that one of these determinants is the tendency to answer in a socially desirable manner. But that is, when items portray socially desirable characteristics in the society, then by far the majority of people tend to attribute these characteristics to themselves.
I see. You're also responsible for bringing some rather unusual animals to Western, are you not?
Yes, a few years ago we purchased some armadillos from Comfort, Texas, had them shipped up here by air. We were interested in them for research purposes.
Could you tell us what's special about armadillos? Why you needed them?
Yes, they're a very unusual animal in that they always give birth to 4 identical young. That is usually 4, and they are right, and they are born from the same fertilized egg, so they are identical.
And why is this important to you?
We had hoped in using these animals to be able to control the heredity variable in our experiments. What we had intended to do was to have the young separated from the mother at birth as soon as possible, then place the young in different environments, and later observe what the results of this would be. We would have heredity controlled ideally because they are identical. We could therefore use a very small number of animals and perhaps come up with some rather radical differences.
How did this turn out?
Unfortunately, we never ran the experiment. The baby armadillos did not survive very well. First of all, the mother, when giving birth to the armadillos, had a tendency to kill them and eat them within a few hours following birth. And this was very disastrous for our experimental intentions.
Of course.
We did manage to get 1 litter away from the mother, and we attempted to rear them, feeding them artificially. However, it seems that the humidity in this area is unfavorable, and they contracted pneumonia.
They're used to a very dry climate, is that right?
Yes, fairly dry.
Practically all departments at Western are involved in research in one way or another. We're now in the geography department with Dr. Mukherjee. Could you tell us about your work, please?
Yes, I've been engaged in a couple of research projects in India, and in one such project, I'm now making some correlation analysis between the rate of food production and population growth in various parts of the country to identify the deficit areas. Then I intend to make some analysis of the patterns of planning that has been done or that is being done in these areas to overcome the shortage. With these analyses, I hope to able to make up some interpretations at what can be done in these areas to overcome the deficit. In another project, I am working on some cities around Calcutta, making some socio-economic analysis. I'm taking such variables as economic base, educational facilities, and employment opportunities in these cities, the size of 25,000 to 100,000, to see whether or not these cities will be able to absorb Calcutta's growing population in future.
This is Dr. Joseph Hashisaki, chairman of Western's math department. The math department at Western has been preeminently successful in getting grants, both pure research grants and more particularly National Science Foundation programs for experienced and inexperienced teachers and summer institutes. By all odds, the most successful of all our departments, and several of them, as you've already learned, have been quite successful. Joe, why do you have a lock on getting summer institute grants from the National Science Foundation?
Well, Herb, I don't think we have a lock on getting these summer grants and academic year institutes, but I think that we've been fortunate here at Western in attracting very able young staff of mathematicians who are active in mathematical research and scholarly activity, and at the same time they have a deep concern for teacher education and teachers, and I think that this comes through in writing our proposals.
While wishing to spare your blushes, Joe, but speaking of the success of the NSF institutes, is it not true that your own textbook, that is Joseph Hashisaki's textbook, is the one standardly used in the NSF math institutes for elementary teachers?
Yes, the book which John Peterson and I wrote has been used most widely in the summer institutes for the elementary teachers. I think one of the reasons for that is when the book was written, it was written with the teachers in mind rather than our own ego or something like that. We were trying to write a book which would actually be useful and helpful to the teachers that are.
You mean you did not write it for the critical math reviewers, but rather for the teacher, but for the classroom teacher?
Yes. This is one mistake that many writers tend to make, and that is that they're writing with what the reviewer is going to say about their book, and they very often get far too sophisticated.